Okay, so this video is going to be like a quick tip, but kind of an overall production thing on how to mix like DI guitars. So this is going to show you pretty much my process of tightening up any sort of digitally amped guitars. So this is what it sounds like, or at least the lead part and drums of the riff. Excuse the underrun that just happened there, but yeah, no edit, just raw take. I played it as clean as I could, and that's really all I could do. So, first things first, I like to go and normalize everything. So we're going to start with the lead part, but we're not going to stay there for very long. So the way I go through figuring out a tone is I will go, okay, I need a gate because I don't need any background hum whenever there's not anything playing. So that's the first step. I decide if the part is really dynamic or if I need it to be consistent. If so, I'll use compression. The way I use this one, I tend to just dial it in till I see a certain amount of gain reduction. So see that 10? That's pretty heavy. So I put it on slow. Oops. So once I have it on slow, that's whenever I just leave it. So for like most guitar parts, like if it's chords or something, I will leave it around 3. Hitting when it's on fast, I have about 3 to 5 decibels of reduction. Then I flip it to slow. The reason I do that is because I want to make sure that it's hitting consistently, and it's a little bit easier to judge that on fast. Slow just allows me to leave a little bit more transient in there. So the next thing I do is I will load up a impulse and load up the head. This is TSE X50. It's the free one. It's an old version. It's not the current one, so it's not the most polished sounding, but it's pretty darn good, and I can't complain. So I like to dial it in right before I get a little bit of grit. So that's around where I like it. So I'm going to copy that over. And the next step for me is Tube Screamer. Anytime I'm doing an overdriven tone, I like to make sure that I have the amp set up pretty good, and then the Tube Screamer is just there to tighten it up. This has got to be set to taste, and it's got to be set on the guitar, so I can't really walk you through this. I could just say, just play with the level and the tone until you get something you like, and if you can't get it thick enough, try playing with a drive. So here's without, and here's with. I'm going to mute this one. So you can hear the difference. It kind of just punches a little bit better. That is all I do. And oh, noise suppressor. This is a plugin I found on the internet. And what it does is anytime you add a distortion pedal into the mix, it will add noise into the signal, which means if there's any sort of hum in your guitar or in your interface, it's going to show up and it's going to kind of be noticeable and annoying. So I always put that after the Tube Screamer, and it just adds another layer of cleanup. So together, these two guitars will sound like. Which, pretty simple. So now we're going to go to the actual production part, not just making a tone. So I'm going to mute these, and I'm going to unmute these. So this is where it's not going to be as fun, because this is the part where the work comes in. These are the parts together. And you could hear the little choppy things. They're not tracked the cleanest. So we're going to go through and we're going to chop it up, put it on the grid. So since I know that I'm not playing any triplets in this, I can actually just go and go to chop into beats. Now I'm going to go into chop into beats again. And I'm going to go to my grid size and I'm going to go 1:4. So now you can see just from looking at this, I have everything gridded. So I have to go through for mine, since I did do a little bit of off time stuff. I have to go through and I have to chop these up. So I'm going to use the slide tool, which is right here. It's the slip tool. I'm going to use that to put everything on the grid. You don't want it grid tight because typically guitars are a little bit late, but you don't want it to be early. That's the number one thing. Keep it sounding natural. So you're going to notice that it's going to cause a lot of weird things right there. That's totally fine. I'll show you how to work that out. And instead of making you guys sit here and watch me do this, I am just going to do this short section and call it, done. So here we go. Now I'm going to chop it to here. Yep. So this is a little bit late. Okay, so that sounded pretty good to me right now. The cut position's really dumb, but it works. So that right there is step one. If you have any bum notes, you may want to replace that. So for whenever I have a bum note, I'll just slide it over and I'll find a similar note. Totally fine with me. So here I am going to just cut that off because I don't like that and I don't need it. I just cut and delete it. So now I'm going to slide this over so now there's no weird spaces. The big thing I was mentioning earlier, when you notice a tail cutting off, you're going to select the slip tool again, the S on the keyboard or up here, and you're going to take this and you're going to use Alt and Shift, and you're going to drag over. When you drag over, it's going to move that. So you're going to allow the tail to go through natural. That's really good for if you have something like this. You can really go in and fine tune where the cutoff is to make sure you don't cut off the tail or the entrance to any notes. This doesn't seem to have that problem anywhere, so I think I'm safe with mine, but depending on the project or whoever played it, you may have a little bit more of an issue. Now I'm going to show you a tip I do that I don't know if a lot of people do, especially not in FL. So I will go here, this volume thing, create automation clip, and then I'm going to go to the second guitar part, and I'm going to link it to the same automation clip. Now both of these are set to this automation clip. This controls their volume. So now we're going to hand gate everything. Since I don't want it to get above where it's already at, which is 50%, I'm going to set this to 50. And the reason I say 50 is because this 50% right here, that is 0. Anything more than 50 and you're going to be adding gain. So I like to set it up like this. And now I'm just going to trace out the outlines. If you want to leave the attack times, you can make the grid smaller by going here, and you can do whatever you want with a curve. But on this, I don't really need it to be natural sounding. I kind of want this to be robotic and kind of dirty sounding. So we're just going to take a listen after I finish this. Here we go. Now let's see what it sounds like. That's pretty darn clean. A lot cleaner than what we started with. I already have a tone on these. It's not going to sound the best, but it exists. So when you combine that with the lead riff that's in there. Oh, I'm going to have to turn the amp sim on. I don't know if my computer is going to be able to handle this, but you should know that since we aligned everything to the grid, everything should be tight. Yeah, I can't play it back, so I'm just going to cut off one of each. So I will go through, and anytime I have a part that's super separated, staccato, or I have any sort of fast chugs, or maybe there's just a note that stands out too much, I'll go through and I will change the volume. If I have to lower a certain note in a single part, I will automate it just to give me a little bit cleaner of a final sound. So hopefully you learned kind of my process of this, and apply it to your next track if you are recording DI'd guitars. Hope you learned something. Anyways, this Audio 101. Peace.